to the Insomniac Show with Nicolette and Brian. We'll get real deep with you, educating, inspiring, and solving problems with some of the most inspirational humans on the planet. Buckle up and come on the journey.
I'm excited. All right, guys, I'm Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here with Glenn Lundy. He is an automotive professional and the host of Rise and Grind, and he's going to talk to us today about some inspiring stuff. So thank you so much for joining us today, Glenn. We really appreciate your time.
Hey, I appreciate you. It is an honor. Thank you so much for sharing your space and your time with me. I know how valuable it is, so I really appreciate it.
So, Glenn, you have a pretty awesome and inspiring story. And before we dive into that, we're going to talk about, one of the things we definitely want to talk about today is creating a movement. But before we get there, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today?
So, I am, as of right now, I am a husband to one, a father to seven, going on 8 little kiddos. And I've been in the automotive world for 22 years. I have my morning show that I do Monday through Friday, 5:30 a.m. called #Rise and Grind. And so, where I am in my life right now, I'm very grateful for, me and my family, we've had a lot of success over the last decade or so. And what I tell people is, I've kind of I've lived 2 sides of life. So I lived what I call a 2D life, where I was mind and body. And so if it looked good and it felt good, the answer was yes. I lived that season till I was about 30. And then since then, I've been living what I now call a 3D life, which is mind, body, and spirit. And so by factoring in that third dynamic, understanding that there are consequences for actions and that we have both the ability to create an amazing, abundant life, as well as a responsibility to do it in a way that makes an impact in other people's lives, been able to really make a shift. So that first season, that 2D season for me, that was that was a rough season. I was in the auto world at a young age. I did well in the automotive world. I was making money. Figured I knew everything. By the time I was 21 years old, I had it all figured out. And living that 2D lifestyle, I really burned a lot of bridges. I ended up having my first daughter, splitting up with her mom, and ultimately losing custody of her when she was 6 years old. From there, I left my hometown, traveled around, burned more bridges, and ultimately landed myself homeless in San Diego, California. For a period of time, I was homeless out there. And really, the homelessness, Nicolette, I'll tell you, with homelessness, the worst part about being homeless is people think, okay, you're hungry, you're broke, you don't have anywhere to live. And that stuff sucks, don't get me wrong. But the worst part about homelessness is you really become invisible. Like, people don't want to make eye contact with you. No one says your name. You just start to blend in with the background. And I wouldn't wish invisibility on my worst enemy. It's the worst feeling ever. And so my homelessness led to this invisibility feeling, which led to hopelessness. And then the hopelessness led me to a deep depression. That deep depression led me to suicidal thoughts. And ultimately, I attempted to take my own life at that point. And thankfully, I was literally ripped out of the ocean and placed back up on the beach, where I had some awareness that, okay, maybe this way that you're living your life is not the best. Maybe this
Just
2D
maybe there's another way, right?
yeah, maybe there's another way. So we should start to explore that. And I did. Since then, I moved all over the country, lived in 17 states, and then landed in Kentucky, where I met my wife, and her and I had our first child, and got back into the automotive world. But this time I was on a mission to not allow the automotive world to negatively impact my life, but instead I was going to make a positive impact in the automotive world. And then that led me to some opportunities to do my show and speak on stages and meet great people like you. And fast forward to that's where we are today.
Do you think sometimes with people, like certain people, you have to hit that bottom Like you were in the ocean, you were done, right? You have to hit that bottom in order to come back out. It's sort of that phoenix thing. You got to burn into the ashes and come back out. You feel certain people that's how they are.
Regretfully, it seems to be the case. Like, I don't know why we're so stubborn and we have to get knocked flat on our backs before we'll look up, right? Les Brown talks about it all the time. If you get knocked down, make sure you can look up, because if you can look up, you can get up. But for some reason, I talk to my friend Brad Wise about it all the time. You see it with immigrants. Immigrants will come over to this country after, being in concentration camps or being in refugee camps, only eating one meal a day, and just really being at the lowest of the low. And then they come here and they see opportunity and they're like driven and they'll outwork everybody. And there's something about having a healthy appreciation and fear of lack or inability to survive. And when you reach that point, it triggers a survival instinct. And I wish there was a pill for it. I wish there was a energy drink or something that people could drink and just get it. But so far, from what I've seen and what I've studied, it really seems like everybody, in order to reach high levels of success, it seems like everybody's got to have that moment of clarity where they get fired from a job like Jobs did, or they go bankrupt like some of these other millionaires. Like it's like there's moment of clarity, like, okay, I gotta shift this a little bit and add an element of gratitude and appreciation. I think that's the main thing that's missing.
Well, I think the problem is, Glenn, is that some people, I think we all have different tolerances for pain. And I think some people can go deeper, and some people can't, and so I think it's harder for the people who don't hit the physical bottom, right? And you quite literally hit the physical bottom, and it's very obvious for those people, okay, this is not, this is no good, we need a change here. And then there are people who are hitting an emotional bottom or a spiritual bottom, right? And it's harder for them to see because on the outside things look okay, right? I mean, like they're still at home, and I think it's harder for those people to come out of certain things because they haven't quite hit that extreme. But for them, it might be, that might be their extreme. So I think it's really even more grateful to hit that physical bottom, like even unfortunately better to hit that bottom, because there's no denying it at that point. Like there's no denying, you can't talk yourself out of that one,
Right.
It's glaringly obvious, right? So I think that's a really cool thing. However, much suffering that brought with it, I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah, I think the three of us, we need to figure out how we can sell it, right? Like, how do you sell rock bottom, right? Guaranteed to shift your attitude to an attitude of gratitude and give you the drive and the fire that you need to be successful in life.
Right.
That's a multi-million-dollar idea right there.
Yeah.
You said something really interesting, right? You talked about being able to look up and see the lights, right? And get back up. That is a huge thing, because everyone gets knocked on their ass once in a while.
That's right.
Everyone gets knocked on their ass. And it's really the ability to stand back up. And one of the other things you mentioned when you're talking about sort of people, coming in and outworking, and it's crazy, because I truly believe that if you focus on something, you could outwork someone that's more talented than you, has more resources than you. But it's always about outworking. How much are you going to put into how much you're getting out, right? So if you work hard at something, you could outwork someone that's maybe, maybe has more resources or maybe smarter. It doesn't matter. It's about putting it in. And it's sort of the same mentality of getting up when you're knocked down, right? It's how you rise up. So
That's right. Yeah, no doubt, man. That work wins.
mhm.
Working hard works, right? I think it's Denzel Washington that said that. Working hard works, man. It's an
Denzel
absolute
always
fact.
has the best quotes, doesn't he?
He does.
Say some profound.
He really does. But no, I had my friend Albert was on my show. He's a refugee, Ugandan refugee, and one of the things that he shared with me that I didn't know is the governments, like the global government,
Mhm.
they will actually, if the economy needs a boost, they will go and retrieve refugees from refugee camps in Uganda and different places, give them a pass to come to America or whatever other country in the world needs an economic boost, because they know that they're 90% more likely to start their own business, create jobs, and spur the economy. Isn't that incredible? Like they'll
Yeah.
just go and grab that mindset and place it into their country to get a boost. Pretty amazing.
Wow. There's something to be said about that, right?
Yeah, there really is, right?
That's crazy. I did not know that.
I didn't
That's
either. I
actually.
was like, they do what? Yeah,
Mhm.
amazing.
So Glenn, I want to touch on something that I did see on one of your resource materials. It was a quote, and it really hit me. We are most comfortable in life right before death. Right now, I think, and I've kind of equated this to, you kind of, it seems like right before you lose something, you kind of like get really good at it, or you form that, you fix that relationship with someone before they pass, or you finally get comfortable in your environment right before you got to move, or whatever it might be, right? I want to talk a little bit about that quote and what that means to you.
Yeah, you're spot on, Nicolette. And where that came from, and so my grandfather, his name was Al Smith, and my grandfather was all American man, right? He was in the army his entire life. He was the president of the Republican Society for the American Legion. He was married to my grandmother for 49 years. My grandmother never had a driver's license because grandpa, good old Andy, as they called him, he was always there for her. She knew that he was going to be there to provide. He was going to be there to take her anywhere she needed to go. They spent every waking moment together. He wore a tie every single day. I never saw the man not wearing a tie. It was crazy, right? So my grandfather, tall guy too, just over 6 foot tall, good build, and just a wonderful human. And so I always admired and idolized my grandfather, especially since I was the opposite. Like I was a stupid kid, right? Um, but I admired my grandfather, and I was in Kentucky, and I got a phone call that my grandpa was dying, and he only had moments left to live. He was battling cancer, and that I needed to get out to Arizona as fast as humanly possible. And so just jumping from Kentucky to Arizona is not super easy. And so it took me a little while. It took me almost a day and a half to get to Arizona. And when I arrived, uh, Grandpa was still alive, even though they had said he only had moments left to live. And so I walked in and I saw him, and he had the tubes all in him, and he had lost all this weight, and he had the gown with the slit in the back. And I didn't recognize the man that was on the table. I didn't recognize him at all. Did not look like my strong, strapping grandfather that I'd known my whole life. Um, and so I got there, and we were still waiting on one more family member to arrive because my whole family's military, so people were everywhere. And another day goes by, and finally my Aunt Julie, she shows up at the hospital, and every single family member is there, right? All the aunts, all my aunts, my uncles, his sons, his son and his daughters, all the nephews, like everybody's there. And we go into this big hospital room, and we're standing in a semicircle, and my grandfather's in the bed, and obviously it's an emotional time. And my grandfather, he says, "Hey Everett's my stepdad. He says, 'Hey Everett, will you come tell me my favorite joke?'" Now you got to understand, my grandfather was military, right? So in the military, they like to tell lots of dirty jokes. And I don't know what kind of audience you got right here. So so shall I continue? I'll
Yeah.
continue.
Go,
Okay.
Go for it.
we can cut anything if we really need
Yeah,
to.
if we really
Yeah,
need
that's
to,
right.
we
You
can
can
always
edit it
cut it.
out.
But we want to hear it anyway.
I
So
want to hear it.
right.
You got to
So
be involved in the story right now, not to tell the joke.
Yeah, I'm in it. You got to keep going with us, Glenn.
good. Okay. So my stepdad walks over to the bed, and he leans in, and he says, "Al, what do they call Moby Dick's father?" And my grandpa just kind of, like, you see this little smile kind of crack on his face a little bit. He says, "What, Everett?" And Everett says, Papa Boner. Right? And so we all chuckle just a little bit, and the tears are just pouring down everybody's eyes, as you can imagine, right? And right after that, after we laugh, my grandpa says, bring me my wife. And so my grandmother, she's like 4'2", tiny little woman. She walks across the room and she climbs into bed with my grandfather. He wraps his arms around her and he dies, like right there in that moment. And so I really learned two things from that experience. One is what Nicolette just referred to. The other is I learned without a shadow of a doubt that we are spiritual beings. Science cannot explain to me how my grandfather was able to wait 2.5 days until the very last family member arrived. He was able to get told his favorite joke and then die with his wife of 49 years in his arms. Science can't explain that to me. So that was the first thing that I really realized in that moment, is that we are spiritual beings connected to something bigger than ourselves. The second thing that I learned is that we are most comfortable in life right before death, because there was a moment, and it was brief, it wasn't long, but when my grandfather was being told his favorite joke and he had his wife in his arms, like the lights came back on in his eyes, his body filled back in, like it was like my grandpa, the one that I recognized, he was back. He was laying on the table. All of the pain had gone away. He was comfortable. He was incredibly comfortable. And it wasn't long. It was a brief moment, right? But it was right before death. And so I reflected back to my own experience when I was in the ocean, when I tried to drown myself. And I remember feeling that same peace that washed over me right before I thought it was the end. And then I look at life and I look at when we get comfortable in our relationships and we start taking people for granted, what happens? The relationship ends. When we get comfortable in our positions at work, we stop doing the extra things, right? Somebody comes in behind us and takes our job. You see it in all professional sports. These athletes, they get their money, they get their cash, they get comfortable. Guess what? Somebody comes, knocks them off. They're bagging groceries at the local grocery store, right? So we see it across the board in businesses, in relationships, and in life, that we're most comfortable in life right before death. And what scares me most about that is if you ask, 90% of people will tell you they just want to be comfortable. I just want enough to be comfortable. I just want to be able to do my thing, go home, work 9 to 5, sleep 10 hours a day, right? Everybody's seeking comfort. And I don't know about you, Brian or Nicolette, but I personally am not ready to die yet. I feel like I still have an impact to make on this planet. And so thanks to my grandfather and that powerful lesson, I've continued to push myself out of my comfort zones, challenge myself to stay uncomfortable. Anytime I sense comfort, I'm like, we ain't doing this, man. We got to level stuff up because I'm not ready to go yet. And so, yeah, that's the lesson behind that. That's where I learned it. And that's what I apply in my life every single day.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because we grew up with sort of, this isn't really stretching, but you stop living when you stop evolving, right?
That's
Basically,
right.
as soon as you stop evolving as a person, as yourself, as growing, as learning new things, is really when you stop living. And it's right into your point where once you become comfortable, you're not evolving, you're not changing things, you're not making things better for yourself, for your family, or whatever the case is. And in that comfort, yeah, I totally agree. It's where things start falling apart, or people catch up to you, if you want to say, like an athlete.
That's right.
You get too soft, right? And it's once again, it's outwork, it's work, outworking.
That's it.
It reminds me of what you said just now. Reminds me of, and I have told you this, Brian. I called my dad one day, and I said I was in a fit of distress, which is a typical state for me. But I called him and I said, and I was really beat down. I was beat down on this particular day. And I said, why can't I just get X, Y, Z, Y, and I work so hard. I just want this and I want that. And I just want to get there. Like, I feel like I'm always just running and I'm never getting there. And And he said, what would you even do if you slayed all your dragons? Right? I mean, what would you even do then? You know, and I stopped because that was not the answer I wanted to hear, right? I wanted him to solve my problem, right? I'm like, tell me how to do this. And I stopped and I thought to myself, yeah, what would I do? I don't want to actually get everything I want right now, because then I'd be bored, and then I'd just find some new thing to want to do, because that's what I do, right? I find the next thing and then I would say I'm not there yet, and that's so, you know, I mean, it's more about it's corny and cliche, right? It's about the journey, right? It's not so much about that destination, because once I get there, I'm not going to want to be there anyway. I'm going to want to be in the next place. So it's, what would I even do then? If I got everything I ever wanted, then what?
Right.
Then what is there?
Here's the question, right? Obviously, all three of us are sort of that same mindset, right? We're looking at evolution of ourselves. We're looking at the next thing we want to accomplish. Are there people, like, let's just be honest, are there people that just don't want to accomplish anything? Like, they just want to, like, they just want to exist, you know? Like, we're all going, okay, how do we change the world? Or how do we leave our impact on the world? Or how do we give ourselves to the world, right? How do we share ourselves or share our knowledge, or whatever the case is? Are there just people who they don't, you know, they just, I don't know.
Well, here's my take on that, Brian. Here's what I believe. And you have a lot of kids, and so do I.
Yeah.
And
And Nick likes to point out between the
I've
two.
just got the one
Well,
equals
it's
12.
8. I have 5. We're getting there, man. So
we're getting there. That's right. We're repopulating the planet.
Repopulating the planet.
Yeah. But one thing that I see in all children, I've seen in all of my children, and my wife is like a magnet for children. So other people drop their kids off at our house. Like, there's just, I don't even know. I don't even know how many kids are in my house at any given time, right? There's just always kids. And one thing I see is that kids, my daughter Willow said it today. She's 6 years old. She was standing in my bedroom. I said, honey, go play. She said, Daddy, I don't have anything to play with. And I thought, okay, hold on a minute. We have an 8,500 square foot house. We have 10 acres of land. We have a pond out there. We have four-wheelers and dirt bikes. We have a movie theater, our own like private movie theater. There's toys everywhere, toys for older kids, toys for younger kids. There's everything, right? Everything that you can think of exists in the Lundy Manor. There's a huge old play set out there. You play in the cornfields. There's all sorts of stuff to do, right? But she says, Daddy, I have nothing to play, nothing to do. Why does she feel that way? She feels that way because she's already experienced all those things.
Mhm.
And as kids, we're always seeking the next experience, right? Then somehow, somewhere, someone comes along and says, sit down, shut up, just be happy. Sit down, shut up, stop, right? Just be content. You have everything you need. You can't have more. You're not worth more. Somebody somewhere along the way shuts that off, in most, not all, in most, whether it's bad parenting or not even bad parenting, like they don't even know, right? Generational passing down of belief systems, habits and behaviors. And so what you see is, you see a world of adults that have lost that desire
Mhm.
for more, that desire to experience something new, that desire to use their imagination, right? It's been lost, and it's sad. It's sad. But I don't think that the answer is that people are just like that. I think that most people have been conditioned over time to settle for less than an abundant life that they are truly and uniquely called for, that they originally felt, but they lost it at some point, right? That's that whole movie, Peter Pan. That's what it's all about, right? Like being a kid forever. I think that Nicolette taps into that. Brian taps into that. Those that are probably listening and watching this tap into that. But there's just too many people that have had their imagination and the exploratory part of themselves squashed, and that desire just doesn't exist anymore.
It's interesting. We were talking yesterday, and we were talking about the fact that, like how I was raised is sort of you get to choose who you want to be, right? Who you are, who you're going to be. And really, it's about going out there and finding yourself. And, and it's interesting because you point out, like, a lot of people, it gets squashed, whether it's their parents or it's schooled or it's, you're not going to be good enough. It don't squash that. People choose who they want to be,
Yeah, and I think there's a misconception too that people think you can only be one person. And
Yeah.
you have to be that person forever. Like what I've learned, especially as of recently, I just turned 43 2 days ago. And so here's what I learned. I learned that in my 20s, I thought I knew everything. In my 30s, I was happy that I finally knew something. And now that I'm in my 40s, I realize I don't know anything. I don't have there's so much more to learn. There's so much out there. And so I've been a different person every 5 to 10 years of my life. And I plan and intend to continue to be a different person every 5, 10 years of my life going forward. I think that's what makes it fun.
Exactly. And that's part of the evolution and finding yourself. I mean, that's, Nicolette, I think you said it's part of the journey, right? And that's really what the journey becomes. It's finding those things, figuring out those things. And it's okay to change your mind at certain points in your life or become a different person or evolve.
Even though everyone will think you're crazy. Yes, it's absolutely 100%.
Listen, my husband is he is the epitome of the person who is content. Right. He's content. And I am the exact opposite. Right. And we are similar in some ways. We do have, we do suffer from some of the same demons, but they come out in very different ways. So I'm extreme one side and he is extremely other. And now in this house, it's hard because I'm always looking crazy, right? I'm like, we got to do more. We've got to make more money and get this and get that. And we've got to go here and we've got to do more. And he's like, but look at all the great things we've got. Like, like, aren't you like, look how grateful you should be. Right. But he really feels grateful. Right. And he really feels grateful because he's also, experienced some things in his life. And this is like, wow, I'm here and I'm happy. And look at this. I've got a beautiful family and I've got a good job. And, what more could I want in life? And sometimes I'm jealous of that because
Sure.
I don't ever feel that, I mean, yes, I have a beautiful family. I'm blessed, but it's so extreme, right? So I get jealous of that, like, contentness in other people, right? That they have this ability to actually just look around and be like, wow, my life is great. I don't really need anything more. Whereas, I do need more. I do need more because that's just me, right? I need more. And that's okay. And I think there's a good balance there because then it prevents me from going off the deep end and it prevents, him from being stuck. Right. And so we find this like really cool balance in the midst of a lot of arguing, right? Because we're so very different, but we find this cool balance. And so I think, I do kind of admire those people who can have those moments of being content. And I will say that there are moments, and there are not very many, that I can look and there's been a moment where everything I can recall, September, I remember the day, so it doesn't happen often. I was and my son just went back to school 5 days a week, right? And
that's just kids. All the kids went back to school.
Well, wait, no, I remember this day, and my husband had, went back to work. He had an accident over the summer. He was home for a while, and he went back to work that same day. And my son went to school, and I came home with my coffee, and I sat down in the chair outside, and I was ready to go in and start my day of work. And I just sat there, and I went, wow. I am so happy in this moment. I am so content with my life right now, like in this moment. It was such a good feeling. It was fleeting, but it was such a good feeling.
She took a sip of coffee and then she was on to, okay, now I need to.
Then she was on to the next thing. And I think you're right? There's this balance, right? We want to have a balance between gratitude and then also pushing and striving for more. But what I've learned, we actually did a series on my show a couple weeks ago. We did a series on African culture, and in African culture, there's this word Ubuntu, which is Ubuntu.
I've heard of this. Tell me about it.
And it's a philosophy that they have, especially in the South African areas. And it's this philosophy that we're all one, right? I am because you are, and it's all connected in some deeper, way. And so that's why they have, the proverb of like, it takes a village to raise a child, because that's really what they believe, is that everyone plays their part and plays their role. But what's interesting and what you're referring to, so my wife's the same way. My wife is, I asked her one night, we were in bed. I said, honey, money's not an issue. Travel's not an issue. We have a teleportation machine, right? We can go anywhere in the world. We can see anything. We can do anything. What would you want to do? And she thought about it for like 4 minutes. And she was like, I just want to be here with my babies, right? She's been pregnant or breastfeeding all but 5 months of the last 10 years. The woman she lives in her hometown where she grew up. Like, she wants our kids to explore a little bit of the world, but then she wants them to build homes on our property, and the grandbabies and like all of that, right? Like, she's okay 100% living in this world. But here's how I look at it. Like, my wife, if it weren't for her, I couldn't do any of the things that I do. None, right? Because she would be jealous of me traveling all the time. She'd be jealous of me speaking or whatever. I look at her like it's almost like a relationship, like a kite, right? Like, I'm a kite out here flying in the wind, doing whatever, and she's on the ground, like holding the string and kind of moving it this way and that way to make sure that I don't crash and burn, or fly out into the ozone and burn up, or whatever. So it's a symbiotic relationship, and I am so grateful for my wife being the way that she is, because it truly allows me to step into the best version of myself that I can possibly be.
So I have a question. So we're talking about people, some people are content, some people sort of stop and they look at it and go, okay, yeah, this is where I want to be, or this is where I need to be. Do you think it has to do with starting points, right? Where, so some people are starting at zero, or some people start at zero, they get to a place in life, they lose it all, then they start at zero again. So it's the appreciation of where you started from, or what you had at the starting point, where you sort of look around and you go, okay, this is better than where I was, right? We talked about you were homeless at one point. Now you're not homeless, right? It's a better place. So is your perspective based on your starting point, wherever you're starting from?
I see what you're saying, and I could see how that could technically make sense. I think for me, in my experience, it's not necessarily the starting point that gives me gratitude or drives me to more,
Mhm.
but it's what I've been exposed to.
Mhm.
Like, that's what I see. Like, not to talk too much about my wife, but like an example with my wife, she's never really been anywhere.
Right.
So because she's never been anywhere, she doesn't really want to go anywhere. She shouldn't realize there's amazing like things out there. She doesn't know what she's missing,
Mhm.
right? And so, like, in my career, in my life, in my relationships, it seems like every time I reach a peak, or I have some type of experience, I see something on the other side that I didn't know was there. I didn't know it existed. And now I'm like, wait. I want to go there now. This is cool, but now I want to go there. So I think exposure and experience is really the driving factor, more than how low you start or where you start. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess more of what I was asking is like your appreciation for things, like, we talk about, I think, Nicolette, you brought it up, like, if you start at a certain point, like, let's say you start living in an apartment, right? And a small apartment. And then over a sudden you move to a bigger house, but maybe it's not the greatest house in the world, right? But it's, you have that appreciation for it, even though it may not be, a mansion, it's
Sure,
a house.
sure,
But you
sure.
start in an apartment, whereas if you started in a house, there's no appreciation for the house, maybe because you're looking at the mansion. Do you see
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So is it your starting point sometimes sort of makes you appreciate smaller things, I guess, is what a
Or your circumstances is another way to look at
yeah,
it.
well,
Whatever circumstances
yeah,
are
that's
you,
what I mean by starting point, I guess. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I see that. I see what you're saying there. I
Yeah.
do.
We're picking up what you're putting down. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
I do.
But you know, and not but, because that would negate what you're saying, and what you're saying is absolute fact, right? What we experience, and when you come from nothing, you have a much greater appreciation for something, 100% of the time. I've also seen people that have something that came from a lot, that are then exposed to people having nothing,
Right.
right? Like I have friends that are incredibly wealthy, and they share a lot of their wealth
Mhm.
with homeless, impoverished, third world countries, because once they're exposed, they're like,
Right.
holy crap, man, I'm sitting here like sleeping on linen, silk sheets and all this stuff, and these people are drinking water out of the same pond as the goats and the freaking cows. And all of a sudden something shifts, and I just see them pouring their heart, their resources, their money, their everything into those people. And I think so, I think that appreciation for things can come from that side as well, just as far as being exposed, and especially if you're an empathic person, being exposed and being able to feel and sense what other people are dealing with in this world. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, we've totally went away from anything I was trying to talk about anyway. So
We did? Are you sure?
for I don't know. I don't know where I was
I thought
going.
this was the whole
I
script
did
that I
want to
saw. I
talk
thought we were
about
right on script.
I did want to touch on movements, but I do also want to hear about your show, Rise and Grind. You've also referred to it a few times. So let's go there. Tell us about your show first, and then maybe we can talk about creating a movement and close
Yeah,
up with
sure.
that.
So hashtag Rise and Grind is a morning show that I do live on Facebook. It's also a podcast and goes out on YouTube, all that good stuff. But 5:30 a.m. Monday through Friday. We did, as of this morning, today's episode was episode 772 of the show. We've been running, going, it'll be 3 years in January. And it's all about motivation, education, inspiration. That's it.
Now,
That's what we
how does
bring.
this tie into the automotive world? Does it at all?
Um, well, Ubuntu, right? Everything is connected in one way or another. Originally, I was in a dealership, very large dealership, small town. We had grown that dealership to become the second largest used car franchise dealership in the country. And a big part of that success is I was doing a lot of social media, a lot of marketing on social media, creative advertising, so on and so forth, a lot of organic stuff, and just had kind of made a name for myself in the auto world, and I had a pretty good following from the auto world. So there came a point where I was like complaining about all of the negativity, division, politics, crap like that on social media, and I know better than to complain. If you're complaining about something all the time, just so you know, that is God challenging you to do something about it. That is my firm belief. Like if it drives you that crazy, go do something about it, because your passion against it is what will fuel and take you to your success on the other side of it. So I was like just so upset about the negativity and stuff on social. It was driving me nuts. And so I was like, okay, I need to do something about it. So what can we do about it? Well, let's create a space. We can't change the whole internet or the world, but let's create one little space where there will be nothing but motivation, education, inspiration. It'll never be negative. You'll never see politics. You'll never see division. You'll never see any of that. It's just motivation, education, inspiration. Then I was like, when can I do that? I have a
5 a.m.
kid.
with
I have a job. I have all these things. I was like, when can I commit to it? And so I was like, maybe I could do it at 7 a.m.
No.
6:30. No, kids are up by 6. All right, 5:30.
5:30 it is.
Yeah, 5:30 it is. So signed up for the
2:30 in the morning when everyone's in bed, right?
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Yes.
So I signed up for the 5:30 slot, which my wife still gives me grief for. She says I'm the only self-employed human on the planet that has to be somewhere at 5:30 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. So um, I had to do it in the morning. I wanted to create that space. And then knowing what I know about the mind and morning routines, and how the brain is just consuming first thing in the morning, it's just consuming so much information and data. And then what I know about marketing and jingles and so on and so forth, I thought, well, this could also be a great opportunity to attach my dealership to something really positive first thing in the morning, which would be great for branding, for our image, for trust, for all of those things. So I used to wake up every day and I'd say, my name's Glenn Lundy. I'm a husband to one, a father to, back then it was like 5 or 6, 4, whatever. Father to 5, and the general manager of Dan Cummins Chevrolet and Buick in Paris, Kentucky, the second largest used car franchise dealership in America. It's 5:30 a.m. and I hope you're ready to rise and grind. So I'd say that every day, and people just started watching, right? And so then people started coming to the dealership because of they trusted me, they liked the energy, they got a positive vibe watching my show. And then I was doing the branding part with kind of the jingle basically every day into their minds and deep down into their psyche. So it really benefited. It was a win-win-win. It was a great thing for me. It helped me increase my disciplines and become a more efficient human myself. And then it helped my dealership as well as far as continue to grow. And then, of course, it helped, our listeners, and now tens of thousands of people, around the world. We've changed the way they start their day. So
Well,
pretty cool stuff.
that's a testament to how much of a grinder you are. The fact
Right.
that you're doing your show at 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Glenn,
So you kind of nicely segued into what I'd like to close with, which is creating a movement, because I think that's what you were doing there, right? In really, I think it really is the beginning of some sort of a movement. And look, we're faced with so many movements today. I don't know. There's like a lot of movements, no matter where you are politically or what gender you are, whatever it is. There's like a movement for you. So I think I'd like to just touch on why or how do you even go about creating movement? Really
So
simple.
the first thing, there's a couple components when it comes to creating movement, and it's really different whether you're trying to create a movement online, create a movement in your business, you create a movement in your family, creating movement in self-development, right? There's all types of different areas, like you said, tons of different movements. But there's key components to all of it. So one of the key components to creating a movement is you want to make sure that it's inclusive and not exclusive, right? Simon Sinek talks about this all the time. Sometimes people try to create movements that are exclusive, so they're against something instead of for something, and they're only allowing certain people in and they're shutting other people out. And you can't really create a movement that way. It's very difficult to do so, because you actually are creating and sparking division amongst your own desire for a movement. See, Martin Luther King was able to create a movement because he was inclusive, right? It was like, hey, everybody has equal rights. Everyone come together. Everyone, let's protest peacefully. Don't raise a hand to anyone else. Like very, it was a very open invitation, right? Everybody can come, versus some of the more movements that you see today, like a Black Lives Matter movement, for example, causes a lot more animosity and angry. It excludes certain people. Doesn't mean to. I understand their thoughts and belief systems behind it, but it just drives a different narrative, which makes it why it's so hard to get everyone to jump onto the same page, right? So we want to think about that when we're creating a movement, whether it be online, so on and so forth. Is you want to be focused and dialed with your purpose and your mission, but at the same time, you want to be inclusive to everybody and don't be divisive, or ultimately excluding people out of that mission, and so, or out of that movement. And so that's one key component of it. The second key component of really creating a movement, there's 3 total that I'll give you, but the second key component is an equation I learned from a book called The Like Switch, Like switch. And this book was written by a guy that was he was an interrogator for the military. It was his job to get Russian spies to become double agents and go back and spy on Russia for the Americans. And so he's like this master negotiator. And then he went from there and got a psychology degree and became a professor of psychology at a college. So he's got all these experiences, and he wrote this equation, and this equation changed my life. The equation is frequency plus proximity equals affinity. AFFINITY. So frequency plus proximity equals affinity. And what this equation means is the more often you and I can interact, the closer in proximity of those interactions, as long as there is a positive sentiment from each of those interactions, it will increase your affinity in me. You will like me more. You will find me more attractive. I will become better looking over time, the more time that we spend together. And we see this, right? You guys see this happen.
Is that
all
what
the
you
time.
did with your wife, Glenn? Was that the equation you used on her?
Just frequency, baby, frequency, right? So we applied that with the show. Frequency, 5 days a week.
Mhm.
Proximity, look, I can't get any closer to you than this, right? I cannot get any closer to you than this. I say this all the time. It sounds kind of weird. Some people have a more intimate relationship with me than they do with their spouse. You know why? They take me with them in the bathroom. They listen to me while they're in the shower. Like, they take me with them everywhere, dude. The places they would never take their spouse. They're like, get out, bro. I'm pooping, right? No, not Glenn. Glenn gets to join them on that endeavor, right? So the proximity piece is amazing what we can do in 2020. I can get into the most intimate areas of people's homes safely, right? So frequency plus proximity equals affinity. So I make sure that every engagement that I have with anyone, every single time, has some type of positive interaction. You're always going to walk away with more than what you came with. That's like my intention and my goal, because I know that if I can do that enough times and we can get close enough over time, you will begin to like me more. And the more you like me, the more likely you are to do business with me. The more you like me, the more likely you are to trust me. The more you like me, the more likely you are to cheer for me, support me, and share my stuff or whatever, right? Whatever it is, as far as creating that movement. So that equation is step 2. 1 is we have to create something that's inclusive and for something, not against something. 2, we got to make sure we use frequency plus proximity equals affinity. And then the third thing in creating a movement is you really have to listen to the need and the desires of the people that are involved in the movement itself. So with my show, it started as a show. Then people were like, Glenn, we want t-shirts. So we started doing t-shirts, and now we do hoodies. We have an entire clothing line. And then they said they wanted a group, their own group on Facebook. So we created a group on Facebook, and now we've got over 30,000 active members, and it's the only place on Facebook that is 100% motivation, education, inspiration. You will not find anything else in there. There's 54 different moderators, and they make sure nothing else gets in there, which is amazing, right? So they wanted that. Then they were like, we want live events. So we started doing live events. Then they were like, hey, we want to do some stuff like offline. And so we started doing charitable events. We raised over $400,000 to battle human sex trafficking. We raised $70,000 for members of the group that were battling cancer. Like, we've taken homeless people off the street, so on and so forth. And so just by listening to the members of the movement, they tell me what to do next, like what direction we should go. They guide it. And so I would say, if you're trying to create a movement, apply those 3 things. Make sure it's inclusive, make sure it's for something, as far as number 1. Number 2, use frequency plus proximity equals affinity. And then the third one would be just listen to the people, and they'll guide you the rest of the way.
That is really awesome. Glenn, I'm so happy. We've been talking for so long. Thank you so very, very much for joining us today. We could probably keep going for hours, so that's why I'm cutting us off. I am cutting us off. But please let everybody know where they can. I know you mentioned a few places where they can find your show, where they can learn more about you. Anything you want to tell us, please leave us with that.
Yeah, best thing to do is go to RISEANDGRIND.life. That's right, RISEANDGRIND.life. That's a new website that we just launched here recently, and it connects all the pieces of the puzzle, right? Our gear to my Morning 5 ebook, which is a powerful Morning 5 routine that you can do, the group, all of those things are all connected. Me personally, I'm there, of course. So that's all connected right there, RISEANDGRIND.life.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're an inspiration, man. Thank
You
you.
really are. You are kick-ass. So I figured I could say that since we're telling dirty jokes anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, golly, we've already gone there. So let's open the floodgates,
Hey, we're
right?
gonna be with you in the bathroom while while one of us. Yes.